Okay then, I think we'll get started. So hello everyone who's joined us this morning and everybody who's watching on video later on. Welcome to the Travel Forward Theatre. The discussion today is called Getting Personal, How Tech, Data and Experiences are Key to Success. I'm Paul Clifford, Group Editor of the Hospitality Group at ITP Media Group. That includes Hotelier Middle East and Caterer Middle East. I'm delighted to be here today to kick off the final day of ATM's in-person section. And I'm sure everybody's pleased to be here and seeing people, especially after the past year. As part of this discussion, we'll be talking about how hotels can use technology and data to enhance guests' experiences and make them more loyal customers. We've got a great lineup of speakers next to me, so I'll introduce them. Next to me, I have Joachim Jan Sleifer, President, Middle East, Africa and Turkey at Hilton. In his role, he oversees 170 hotels across around 8 brands, with about the same amount again in the pipeline. Hello, JJ. Welcome. Morning. Next to JJ, we have Amir Goldberg, Vice President Operations, Middle East, North Africa, Seychelles, and Mauritius for Minor Hotels. Amir oversees around 25 properties in 6 countries across 4 brands, and we'll be hearing a little bit more about a new addition to that here soon. Welcome, Amir.
Thank you.
Next along, we have Siegfried Nierhaus, Vice President, Middle East at Deutsche Hospitality. Siegfried's been in the region for around 16 years, and during that time, he's opened about 20 hotels, Middle East and Africa, for various companies. He's also worked across covering India and Asia. During that time, he's worked directly for hotel owners, international hotel operators, and one of the region's largest hospitality consultancy firms. Siegfried, hello and welcome.
Thank you.
Finally, on the end, we have Carl Iskrit, Executive Creative Director for Like Digital and Partners. Carl is an e-commerce expert in UX and UI, specializing in the retail, luxury, and hospitality sectors. Welcome, Carl. Thank you all for joining us. So, we'll get started. Data and technology. Carl, we'll bring you in first as you were the last.
Is that because I'm at the end?
Yeah.
Today, so.
This is your domain, so you're probably the best to just kick us off with about telling us how data is so important to hotels and how they can use it to their advantage.
That's a very good,
big question.
A nice big opening question, icebreaker. I mean, it's a huge topic. I guess it's the topic and it's the buzzword, even though it's not really a buzzword anymore on kind of everyone's lips at the moment. It's probably a hot topic for 2 reasons, I think 2 main reasons. One, for the first time, I think customers are now aware of data. They're aware of the value of their own data, what it's worth, how it is used or how they want it to be used. And therefore, as a result, brands, and I'm quite broad when I talk about brands, that includes your all of the hospitality, hotels, resorts and stuff as brands, as well as the wider ecosystem, have to be more aware of that as well. So that is where it is, I think, from a customer perspective. But I mean, it'd be interesting to, I guess, see what the guys think really before I talk too much about this topic.
JJ, we've spoken about, and Carl and me spoke briefly earlier, about the difference between people giving permissions but also giving you information about their preferences. And I know preferences is something that you're very keen on with Hilton through your apps and loyalty programs. Can you tell us why that's important for you to have that information and how you use it?
Yes, I think the preferences that customers give us actually helps them shaping their journey. And so that starts from the moment they're opening the app, the Hilton Honors app, which is our loyalty program. And we know a lot about the customers. We know what they like to book, where they like to stay, and so customers like it when we give them that information on the page first. And it goes much further than that. Actually, we give them special offers for their preferences. If you're likely to book a golfing holiday, we would start with all the golfing options that we have, because we want our customers to know that we care about them and that they get the best offer if they book directly with us. once they've booked, that goes much further. We like to know, of course, from them, what's the ideal temperature in the room you actually like. And we're building these smart rooms where you walk in and the room recognizes who you are and will set the temperature for you. You'll be able to, via the app, you're actually, today already, you can check in to the room. You can select the room where you want to be, a bit like the airlines have been doing for years and years and years. And people, we work together with Google Maps, so you can see where you're looking out on from the room. And some people have a strong preference to look out on the west side instead of the east side. And so we're using all this data actually to tailor the whole experience and the whole journey to make it sort of seamless. And and I think people. And I'm interested to know what my colleague at the end is going to say later when he's talked about brands. I think customers like brands if they can trust them. And so they are more likely to give permission to use their data and their preferences to brands that they can trust. And so this whole protection of data and the privacy of our customers is very, very important. I think once you breach that trust, you have a real big problem. But as long as you have the trust, people are more likely to give you more access to data, and so therefore we can shape their journey.
Yeah. We're talking about apps, Emma. This is probably a good time to bring you in. Tell us a little bit about what you've announced kind of this week, and how that fits into what we're talking about, and how you can start from a good point using the information that you know.
I think it's an important one when we mention data, because I mean, it's such a saturated word to begin with, right? It's one of those words that's been used in the industry way before COVID, and it's been one of those words that is, data collection is a norm. We've all been doing it, but the key is not collecting the data; is how do you personalize and use it for the consumer and for the guest. And I think for us, COVID was a catapult. It was really looking at from, historically, if you look at apps and some of the express services that are offered with apps, it's synonymously been driven a lot into corporate hotels. It's been very much the city-based hotels that are very, I would say, far ahead in that with express check-ins, offerings, touchless go, et cetera, et cetera. But I think with COVID, we had the option now of looking at how do we bring that in also into destination resorts, leisure hotels that are much more into sort of the transient market. Which historically have been much more, more with direct touch points rather than touchless. So for us, we developed and launched our two new apps, the Avani and the Anantara app, which sort of took, in my opinion, the best of both worlds. As much as you want to be touchless, you still want to be connected. As much as you want to have the ability to do everything without having any direct engagement, you still want to be engaged. And how can you use an app to have the services such as, choosing your room, coming in and not having to going through a check-in counter, can enter your room without any form of engagement or card, etc. But at the same time, being connected and having that 24/7 villa host experience on call without having to feel disengaged from some of the offerings and services a resort can give. And that's what we really took both worlds, put them together. And I think from our side, the privilege was we had the edge from the NH acquisition in 2019, which are much stronger in the corporate side than we were. And they had all of those basic corporate check-in offerings, express check-in, check-out, etc., and took that along with the Anantara and sort of merged the two and launched our new app, which has been a great success. And I think adding on to that, just to add on the data collection, I think what was really important for us was, as much as you see in the airline industry and other areas, as much as you have loyalty programs and you have all of these measures and tools, the engagement levels have been stagnated since COVID. So how do you re-engage and how do you not bombard? And that's where CRM was important for us. We looked at, day to day, the travel corridors open and close. You have the domestic market you want to tap. You don't want to start bombarding regions or areas or corridors which are not open yet with unnecessary information. You want to make sure you tailor it in accordance with what the government's come up with. And that's where the apps and our CRM tools work hand in hand. And COVID has been a real catapult to make sure that we personalize, but it's still touchless. And those two are hand in hand with that. So I think that was a big step in for us moving forward.
Siegfried, all of you guys on the panel will have the same opinion about hospitality, that it's a people-based industry. We're talking about the ability to reach people without being face-to-face. We're talking about people being able to check into hotels without seeing someone, without even talking to somebody on the way in, perhaps. How do you, as a hotelier, make sure that, like Amir says, people are still engaged and people are still connected and feel that personal touch while all of these technologies are coming in?
I think the colleagues here as well on the panel said it's about the integration of the new way of doing business and integrate the new data technology, but at the same time to keep why we are in the business and to keep why we started in the business is working for people with people. And I think the COVID time, which you have seen, has brought tremendous change to everyone's life, and everyone is eager to go back into socializing, meeting people, gathering, to see that kind of event happening in Dubai. It's a big sign for the world. And I think you see the crowd, or you see the people which you met here, they are very eager to just meet, greet, and see. And we as hospitality, we are one of the labor-intensive, but as well socializing venues and events. And I think it's very, very important that we as industry stay strong, that we are very conscious about the period, that we are very conscious about adaptation of our businesses. And I think in the last year, and you have seen that one of the major events happened, that we all learned how to adapt to be able to manage properties in keeping a positive bottom line, even with less revenue, less occupancy, less average rate, and all of a sudden being able to learn, especially in the Middle East, how to make business with less people eventually. And of course, this whole integration of technology and data is a big part of it. We as company, we are in the middle of merging with our new Chinese owners. We are merging the data, right? We talk about data, how important is that? So for us, it has been a tremendous change and huge turnaround from, give you an example, initially with Deutsche Hospitality, we have 50,000 qualified, loyal members. We pass now into a level of getting 160 million data and loyal members into our award system, right? And when you see about the merger in the past, it has happened a lot about gaining more loyalty members. So the whole COVID period was about getting together the best of the two worlds, right? Of the Chinese and the European and Middle Eastern way of doing hospitality. Ultimately, to serve the customer, and like you rightly said, to be able to go into a normal interaction with guests. And some people like interactions, some like less interactions. And you have seen in China, in Japan, in Asia, you have hotels with almost no staff. Of course, you have to see the balance from every brand, and every level of hospitality has his client expectation, and we need to meet them, and we can adapt.
Carl, maybe you should explain a little bit more about what you do and how you basically, you are the person that shows people what they want to see on screens, right?
I'll just take responsibility for all of this. No, it's really fascinating. There's so many interesting things that the guys are saying. I think at the top, JJ talked about this difference between permission and essentially the collection of data. They're very much two different things, yeah? Permission, preferences. So, and this really is for me, it's the fundamental key to any successful personalization program and the success to the use of data, but very much divided between these two pillars. We're kind of, and many brands are guilty of essentially just the collection, yeah? So, like, collect this amount of data, let's collect this. And it's almost become an obsession, yeah? How much data that can we possibly collect on an individual, yeah? And this is nothing like new, because even before technology, like data was collected all the time. It was just done in a much more rudimentary way. People sat there with little clickers and, okay, they roughly figured out what the demographic of the person who was walking through the door, and maybe luckily you got an email address. So we've always collected data.
Yeah.
The issue, I guess, and I think the challenge for brands right now is the amount of data that can be collected. And this is more from an omni-channel kind of perspective as well. So you've got data coming through your site, through your app, through your CRM, through your door. Maybe you're collecting something and analyzing the people who come through the restaurant or so on and so forth. So all these channels in the truest sense. And when we talk about that, and especially from the hospitality industry, because there's so much reliance on the physical space, not just lobbies and restaurants, but we've talked about in-room data collection. So you now have this whole mass of data that you have on an individual, much more than you ever had before. Well, what do you do with that? Well, yes, we can analyze that data and make decisions off the back of it. And maybe we say, well, we take that data and we say, well, because we looked at this, maybe we make this decision. And because we looked at this, maybe we put these people in a particular segment. And then we'll make a decision off the back of that segment. But really, I think what we're going to see, and really the people and the brands that are going to win in this data space and this personalization space, is those who harness the kind of preference of the individual. Yeah. So, what do I actually want? Yeah. And this comes through a number of different ways. Inferred. Yeah. So how they act within the resort. So maybe, really fascinating that maybe I come into the room and I leave at a certain time. Well, maybe I make an inferred preference off the back of that. But then also the kind of preferences that the user puts in. Okay, I want to be communicated at this time. I want to be communicated at X time and so on. And it's this really that builds this kind of this personalization strategy that is actually truly what it says, and it is personal. Mm-hmm. That's essentially what we try to do with brands. It's that understanding of how you gather, where you gather it, why you're gathering it, and then actually not only what you're doing with it, but also what the user wants you to do with that data.
Mm-hmm. JJ, talking about personalization instead, we just heard some people come into the room at one time, go out for dinner at one time, want to get a call to remind them that this is happening, want somebody to knock on the door and check everything's all right. The person in the next room has got a totally different idea of how they want to be treated. How do you make sure that you get that right, get the balance right, and get people's preferences spot on so they know they can trust you, which you said was so important earlier on?
Yeah, I think Carl just said it very well. It's about finding that preference, that little niche, and we call it phygital. It's the balance between physical and digital, and how do you make sure you integrate those? For us, it's about choice and control. So you have the app, and you give us the preferences. You say what you want and what you don't want, and that takes time. It's not after one interaction with you that we decide what your preferences are. So that takes time, and that gives us the opportunity to make it alive for you. I think the really tricky part is do you want to start sending messages to customers? And some are quite open to that, I guess. So imagine staying in a resort and you're walking by the bar. You like to get a message on your app and say, well, it's a 2-for-1 offer tonight between 5 and 7. These are the kind of things, some people like and some people don't. Mm-hmm. And it's, balancing all that information because, Carl just said it, we can do anything actually. I mean, nowadays with data, we can push information to you, we can stop pushing information to you. So it's finding that right balance because we want to be that trusted brand and we don't want anybody to think ever, and I think this is where I'm struggling with sometimes, is I don't want you to feel that we are not giving you all the information that is there. Mm-hmm. And I think, that is about trusting in the brands. I think that is, if I travel myself and you get offers sent when you're at an airport or from the airline you're frequently traveling with, is it really personalized? Because I get very annoyed if I get advertisements for things that I would never use anyway. Mm-hmm. But I am enticed to click on it when it's something that I'm doing often. And it's creating that trust. I think that is the first and foremost, most important thing.
Yeah.
Timely and relevant, I think, is what I mean, it's a really fascinating point what JJ's just raising there. But this notion that we often forget that these messages must be timely and relevant. It's just such a simple concept that, and it is forgotten with data bombardment, is that how do we just, and sometimes an offer is not relevant. Sometimes it's not timely. If I've just booked, or if I've just been on holiday and I've just come back 2 weeks later, well, what message should I get? Why should I get it? What is my kind of mindset as a customer? Where is my life cycle on my next purchase? Yeah, and I think it's these both from on an app perspective or an actual device perspective, also as what JJ is pointing out there, with actually the ability now to communicate with customers within resort or within the hotel means that it's even more important to have timely and relevant communication.
Mm-hmm. I mean, as someone who's just launched 2 apps, all of this is taken into account, I'm sure. But that's sped up because of COVID, hasn't it? Your introduction of these apps the last year has accelerated the introduction of some technologies into your hotels. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that has affected it as a business and how you've come to the conclusion that, right, we need to do this now?
I think it's when we talk about preferences, when we talk about collection of data, we've been synonymous with our Anantara, with our destination resorts, and collection of preferences, creating and curating experiences has always been part of our DNA. We've done that always. But if you look at the change in the market, and I think that's where updating and managing these preferences are key. When we launched these apps, we realized very quickly that our business model also has changed, the preferences has changed, because a lot of the business that were driven, particularly in this part of the world, was domestic. The domestic traveler versus the inbound traveler, there's also a change in the preference and the lifestyle. What do they look for? And I think for us, when we launched the apps, we looked at 2 elements. We looked at, one is the traditional, building up your preference and your DNA and your profile and making sure we personalize the stays, but also how do we cater for our domestic clients, the ones who are, to a certain extent distressed, they couldn't travel out, they're spending their holidays domestically in a resort. Their preferences change when they stay domestically in a space versus when they travel to Maldives or Thailand or other parts of the world, because you need to adapt to that. And also, how do you capture them without staying in the resort? It's not only preferences while you're staying there, but you also want to make sure that you keep them engaged on an F&B offering, on a spa, on other areas as well, without bombarding them with spam, but at the same time understanding that there's certain timely communications that you can keep them engaged with. And that's why for us, the launch of the apps was not just for a guest that comes and stays in our resort, but it's also taking our current, I would say, our loyal following and keeping them engaged with the brands domestically without even staying in our hotels. And that was a key aspect, and that goes hand in hand with the launch of our new loyalty program as well, which we're revamping and relaunching hopefully towards the end of the year, which is going to be as much focus on the reward and recognition program as much as driving domestic. And I think the domestic power has really increased for a lot of us here, and we've realized that we've been traditionally in a lot of markets, we've been driving a lot of business focused on inbound travel, but the domestic has actually sustained and maintained us for the last 12 months, and that's an area where we focus tremendously on, both on the app and the launch of our new loyalty program. So I think that's really helped us a lot, and I think moving forward you will see a lot more into that space. And I think the other element, which again coming to data and making data relevant, is really looking at, I've had many of my friends, for instance, in Denmark, they couldn't travel here. They've been bombarded with unnecessary information because it's spam that goes out to globally. And it, rather than doing a favor and supporting them, it actually defeats the purpose. What you want to do is to make sure, as timely as we're talking, we also have to time it with how the government announce openings, how do you tackle relevant information based on travel corridors, relevant information based on openings of borders, and making sure that who you target, it times it correctly with them actually being able to come and visit. So a lot of that information has been analyzed, and I think, again, saying COVID is a catapult, I think it's more of us understanding that we've all had the data but how can we now look at much more personalized and preferencing that into each individual traveler and the restrictions that globally are in place. So for us, it's been a fantastic tool. I think GCC again has been our launch ground for a lot of new initiatives the last 12 months, and it's going to continue doing so, hopefully.
Siegfried, everyone here has talked about that. Data's always been there. Loyalty programs and loyalty members are key. You just mentioned earlier that you went from 50,000 people in your database to now access to 160 million thanks to your parent group. That parent group also coming out of Asia, another point you raised, that the hotels in that part of the world are ahead of us in terms of coming out of COVID or dealing with COVID, ahead of us in terms of putting technology in their hotels. How, presumably, you can use that to your advantage as you start on your expansion plan here in the Middle East?
I mean, a part of the immense number of data through the loyalty members, and I hear the panel, and absolutely right, it's not all the time about the amount of data, it's what you use with the data and how do you use it, right? I think ultimately, if I just may say that the Huazhu Group, who is our owning company now, the founder is an IT expert. So it's not a hospitality person, it's an IT expert who started a company called Ctrip, who is this Chinese booking.com tool and platform. So he developed his business model through collecting data and having access to people's communication tools that they're using. So he is proudly announcing that he developed the system and 75% of the bookings coming through the systems, right? So somehow he must have something right in China, and we try to take benefit of that. Of course, not everything is feasible, not everything is possible. Data protection is one thing. I mean, we talked about this. It's always a big thing that we need to respect. Let me just do a little anecdote on that. And I don't know if you heard that yesterday there was in Germany a big announcement. I don't know if you knew, in Germany we have a minister for digital. So the minister of digital announced that he launched a pilot project in creating a digital identity, which is literally a phone application which is supported by the government and big German companies, where literally the check-in process is extremely easy to do because you create an ID wallet on this application, and basically all the informations are on that application to do a very easy check-in, check-out process. And it's not only the initiative from one company. It's you can see that Europe, and even a country like Germany, who is sometimes considered as being conservative, is going into that technology and using the digital world. And we were happy to be the pilot project. So 200,000 people can in 40 Steigenberger hotels can use that kind of facilities. And yes, the Chinese are known for the big economy brands, and our owning company is big into the economy brands, and we work with check-in kiosks, the same what you see at airports now, right? I am sure all of us, we are traveling, and you have the choice now in going to reception or going to do the check-in, where you have people standing and getting your check-in done because you have a question, because you want some additional question, or you go to the self-check-in, right? So this is working. This has been initially looked into a little bit with hesitation, but you see the majority of the people are going now to do the self-check-in. And this will be happen and is happening as well in the hotel industry, where we try to bring the new technology, right, and talk about the Asian advantage. Yes, we are in the middle of designing and adapting it to our laws and rules in the different areas we are. The whole COVID period, basically, in our company, we are just integrating this, and we launched in the summer the integration of the loyalty program. We launched a one-stop platform where we have all online bookings, where we have all the OTAs be able to book all our sales activities. Even operational tools will be on that, how to facilitate digitally with your phone, managing your room, managing the breakfast, managing technical. So many things will be changing in the industry or are changing already. and thanks to COVID, the whole thing accelerated in a tremendous pace. I think otherwise it would have lasted for years, but now all of a sudden everyone within a year and 2 years, everyone is at a level of going digital, which has not been expected before.
Yeah. JJ, a few of you have mentioned that, have talked about what we're talking about today in reference to aeroplanes and airports already having some of this in place. One of the things that traditionally we've talked about with you and your peers is that the hotel industry has maybe traditionally been a little bit slow because it's very traditional, and the change sometimes takes a bit longer. We've just heard that in the past year that seems to have gone out the window. It also seems to have coincided with maybe a different type of traveller, more curious about destinations and experiences within those destinations, and a type of hotel that, it's a broad term, but a lifestyle hotel that you have, and more brands and soft brands are appearing for most groups. The use of this technology and touchless and connected rooms and things like that, which we'll talk to Carl about as well, seems to have serendipitously come at the same time as a new generation of traveller that want to use technology a little bit more, and some hotels that kind of fit that brief.
Right, I'm not sure it really had to do with the pandemic, but we have created a lot of things in the last year which would normally take probably 10 years. And so one of the things we actually looked at, if you look at people traveling, and I'm not completely agreeing with what Secret just was saying about the check-in kiosk. I think the check-in kiosk, I think we have passed that stage. I think, people really want to use the phone actually. And so when people come to our hotels, some people will, and that I agree with what Secret just said, will just want to go to the check-in desk and talk to somebody. Something that we have done, there's a couple of things we have done in the last year. I think, one of it is that you can book a workspace. People don't want to work from home the whole time, they want to book a workspace. So you can use your phone, make a booking in one of our hotels, and you get a room or part of the lobby where you have Wi-Fi, and you can, access workspaces, something which we didn't do before, but we had to do. The other thing which we have launched is connecting rooms. So connecting rooms, we always had connecting rooms. All the hotels always have connecting rooms, but you could never really book connecting rooms and decide on which floor and where you want to have them. And one of the trends we've seen, because there's more leisure business now than sort of the traditional corporate traveler, is that families are traveling and more extended families are traveling. So, we haven't seen grandpa and grandma for a while, so we're going to take them with us on holiday. And so there's 8 people traveling, as where traditionally only 4 people were actually traveling. So now you can actually book them. And so we've done that in the last year, which is quite a complicated thing. For me, it sounded very easy, but they told me it was very difficult. But now it's done. And the other thing we have on our app, and again, everything is the app-based, because with our 115 million Hilton Honors members, it's just the easiest thing to actually do. We have something which is called Hilton Suggest. And this is where team members actually suggest something to our customers. And customers really like it. So we have that for 180 cities now. We have hundreds of our team members who actually contributed to this. So you go onto your booking, you click on Hilton Suggest, and you see options for dining, things to see in the neighborhood. And so our customers really like that, because it's not something which is created by Google or by anybody via travel agent. It's actually created by team members. And so team members add their comments and say, this is a great place to eat, this is the best pizza in town, this you should absolutely go and see. If you're only 3 hours in town, this is what you should do. And so, that interaction, trying again to make that link sort of between the physical and digital and make it really personalized. Because if you read the comments, you see it's written by a team member. It's not written by somebody else. So, it makes it really personal.
Amir, mentioning the use of technology in hotels, lifestyle hotels, you've just announced your first NH property in Dubai this week. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit more about how that fits in with the current way of travel and guest experience?
I think it was an important milestone for us on 2 fronts. Obviously, we acquired the brand in 2019, and it complemented our existing portfolio tremendously. being obviously both geographically, but also the type of clientele that D&H represents. It's predominantly a corporate-driven brand, and we were historically a leisure-driven company. So it complemented on both fronts from that aspect. And I think all the more as well, looking at the loyalty base and the type of program they were running with. They had a very strong loyalty program. It was the traditional point-based system, which most other operators work with as well. And it had a fantastic following in Europe. And for us, we always wanted to look at how do we integrate the two. And I think, again, factoring in the launch of this brand into the region, it's not only opening another hotel, but for us was integrating two major databases into one, bringing in sort of the corporate traveler into this part of the world, and as well launching the Discovery 2.0, which we also announced a few weeks back, where NH, with their database, will be joining into our new Discovery program, which will be launched later this year. That itself is going to represent, I think, a major milestone for us. So the NH coming in was making sure that we obviously cross-brand our and bringing our other brands into the region, but as well enforce ourselves with our larger database. I think what's interesting, and I'm bringing it into an earlier discussion about corporate travel, D&H has a very strong following on their points and their corporate travel business. We've been very strong in the leisure and domestic and the travel trade. And I think for us, with this launch, we realize that, whilst the travel trends change, preferences we've been collecting for many years have been evolving. Now we're realizing how can you bring them together and evolve with that. In the corporate segment, we don't have much into the wellness, spa, and other incremental spends. In our side of the business, we've been very strong in that. We've now realized that the corporate and the leisure are actually merging more and more into each other, because the type of hotels that traditionally used to run corporate, as JJ mentioned, you suddenly see a demand for families traveling, the demand of a leisure hotel suddenly moving into a corporate hotel, and vice versa. So how do you integrate that data, and how do you make sure that you personalize it and understand that there are some data that are built up purely because of COVID, such as guests are now looking much more into preferences of sanitaries and other things, which are, I would say, a short-term measure. What are the things that are here to stay for a longer period of time in terms of data and preference? And how do you integrate the two and understand the patterns of the consumer for the last 12 months versus the next 10 years? And that's, for us, with the integration of NH, was key. We understood now that, with our traditional Anantara brand, we've been very strong in the wellness and spa and that side of the business. That has been a major boom into the business, and we've traditionally always had that as part of our preferences, but never been something that's been picked up as a key priority. Now it is. Our Casa Al Sarab, we launched the new 2.0. Wellness was one of the biggest moves for us. We've been very strong traditionally in wellness in Asia. We brought that in here. But now, interesting enough, brands like NH, who've been traditionally very much corporate, touchless experiences, also see an integration of that coming in. So you may also see that moving into your traditional corporate hotels moving forward, where we're going to see a lot more hybrid between your traditional corporates and your leisure destination resorts with a full service, spa, wellness, etc. offerings, where you can curate the experiences, the culinary, the dinings, the wellness journeys. And that's why I think for us the key was not just bringing a brand into the region, but looking at a much bigger scale. We have, within the NH collection and the NH brand, we have around 380 hotels in Europe and Europe and Americas. And now we're looking at a lot of the services we've had traditionally with our brands here, moving that as our first flagship in the NH here, but next step looking at how can we bring that into some of our European hotels into the sort of post-norm COVID era, where corporate and leisure is going to find its way into a melting pot, hopefully.
Yeah.
So,
Carl, I think some of these points touch on the discussion we had earlier, loyalty programs and offers. I don't want to throw you under the bus too much, but you don't necessarily 100% agree with the other gentleman on the panel on the value of offers. But what Amir's just said about kind of integrating experiences from different brands that need to be a bit more agile maybe is what people are going to take more notice of when they're looking to book somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point. I mean, loyalty, and I think the Middle East is, There's a lot of loyalty programs in the Middle East, maybe more than anywhere else I've ever experienced and where I've worked. Why? Maybe because there's more of a domestic market in regards, because obviously there's a lot of F&B and there is a lot of, it's a different market, as the gentlemen have said, in regards to staycations and so on and so forth. That may be the reason behind it. I mean, I don't have any fact on that. But there is, what we do know is there's a lot of loyalty programs. And a lot of these loyalty programs are offer-based, yeah? So you do this, I give you this offer. You do this, I give you this offer. It's kind of fine. But I think sometimes, we create and have done some very successful loyalty programs in the Middle East, so I'm not against them, because they very much pay the rent in many places, which is great. But I think what we have to think, and I think what the interesting thing is how we see them going forward in a much more connected brand ecosystem and a much more connected consumer ecosystem, is kind of probably getting back to what is loyalty, yeah? And human beings, by their very nature, are loyal, or can be loyal, yeah? So, well, why am I loyal? Well, I go to, X restaurant near my house, and I get great service, and I don't have an app, I get great service, and so on and so forth, and I go there every week, and so on and so forth, and that is loyalty in its very, very basic sense. And there's this thing now which we call which is reward, or the digital reward, which kind of existed kind of anywhere before. Reward is not points, reward is not offers, reward is actually experience. Now sometimes it can be, points can sometimes enhance an experience, or offers can sometimes enhance an experience, but ultimately a reward is given, yeah, because the customer feels loyal and therefore they do something time and time again, which is really fascinating. I think where I kind of, I guess, see loyalty going is in a much more, is it being connected a little bit more. One thing I guess it does do is it creates this level of brand recall, yeah? Because, I may have an app or a website, and it's that age-old thing around, well, it's not on my home screen, or it's on page 5 of my device, and then I download it, and I use it once, or use it twice, and I never use it again. So I think it has a purpose also in this kind of brand recall in this very competitive world. That's great. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how these loyalty schemes can fit into an ecosystem that is much wider, much more challenging, and actually kind of probably get a little bit more human. And I think we're seeing that with a few things that are coming out there.
Siegfried, you're nodding along.
Sorry?
You were nodding along with Carl there, so you're obviously in agreement. What are your thoughts on it?
I mean, yes, one thing that Carl mentioned is about how you make a customer loyal, because today everyone has so many apps on his phone, everyone has so many loyalty cards in his phone on almost everything, right? You talk about the phone company, you talk about where you go shopping, you talk about anything. So everyone has a loyal or wants to bring the same somehow spirit and strategy of making people loyal to a brand. So like you rightly mentioned, some loyalty needs to be achieved once the client is on site or once he's booking, that literally you can tell him, as loyal customer, you get XYZ advantage or benefit. And if then you increase your number of points and you get more benefits, this is what we do since many, many years, I think successful in the hospitality industry. And we just try to enhance it through bringing new partners from other parts of the businesses. Initially, the hospitality industry was successful in dealing with airlines, and then you had an alliance with a car rental company, and this is it. So that was basically what we were good in. But I think the expectations are changing, the world is changing. We need to try to find new ways of engaging with our customers. So if we know them, we know what their preferences are, and we know how we could eventually use these points earned in our properties in order to use them as well differently. So yes, I somehow, of course, agree with Carl, but the world is changing, right? And it's adaptation. So this is, I think, what I get out, what Carl said, and I think we all on the panel are the same.
I think and it's really, changing faster than anyone ever anticipated. And COVID, whatever, it just is what it is. But I guess it's that, and we talked about this, Paul, the other day, is when we look at loyalty, the moment I have a bad experience, the moment my food isn't good, the moment my room isn't how I expect, or maybe my check-in experience just wasn't as good as it was last time, then doesn't matter how many apps, how many points, how many offers, I'm no longer loyal, or I'm less loyal than I was the last time. And this probably is, I think at the top of this, where we talked about the human nature, the fact that we're still dealing with people, yeah, at the end of the day, and people react to how they are given service, yeah, and really this is a service. Hospitality is service in every way, really, and it's those. Once I have the digital touch points, but if the physical hospitality is lesser, subpar, not optimal, less experience, regardless of how many preferences I have, regardless of how much permission I put in, you begin to lose that.
100% what he's saying. The engage, that's why we are the hoteliers the way we are, right? This is when you start the hotel school, and we all did hotel schools, it's about transforming a negative hotel experience into a positive one. How can you do that, right? And this is somehow the art of being successful. And these bad experience can happen in any service industry, and will happen and will continue happen forever and ever. We will not achieve 100% all the time satisfaction, but the art of our business is to transform this somehow negative into a positive experience, which is absolutely possible. But the basic is to get engaged and have conversations and be open and empower your staff members. So it's the basic of our hotel industry, but sometimes we forget. And if we run too much into digital, and if we run too much into just systems, then the human touch is gone, and this would be not, I think, what hospitality should be.
Yeah, and the very last point just on this, because I think it's just really fascinating, just being said there, is that it doesn't mean that digital isn't a solution, but it can be. So, and it can enhance a good experience and make people more loyal. It can also take a less optimal experience and make it better, yeah? So if I've had a great experience at whatever hotel or whatever resort, well, what are my post-comms? What are my post-communications? Because I can then become more loyal. I can get that bit of surprise and delight. And surprise and delight is really, I think, is the key to enhancing loyalty, and digital channels are optimal for doing this. So maybe, my dinner, I don't have a great experience at X restaurant, and, it was cold, or it was late, or I didn't get the table I like. Okay, well, what happens post that experience, yeah? Right. And maybe the chef comes out and gives me a glass of bubbly to say sorry, or whatever it is. But maybe afterwards, that a day or so, a few days later, I get something else that is not just a discount, but is actually, okay, well, it's some sort of personalised communication, which then, takes the edge off that. And I think that's where really the opportunity is, I think, on both sides of the picture.
But I think, sorry, just to add in, because you mentioned something earlier on, Carl, and I think that's been the DNA of the way we do business, and I think that's even more enhanced with digital, is the engagement and the emotional connection. These are the two factors that keeps loyalty, in my opinion. That's very important, We've traditionally been very much driven as an experiential brand. Our company has been experiential, and even when we launched our initial loyalty program, it was not around the tradition of building points and rewards, because that's a common factor, and that doesn't necessarily build loyalty. It builds, it's a given, you get that, but I think more important is how do you make sure that there are experiences involved? And I think for us, digital was not a replacement. Digital was an enhancement. Digital was an opportunity to keep engaged. And I think where a lot of people get wrong is digital can still be personalized. And I think that for me is personalized, meaning you still have the opportunity of engaging directly with a human via a digital channel while you're remote. You're dealing with a computer or a data analysis system. For us, one of the biggest things now is the chatting, right, through apps. They love that because they're still engaged, they're still communicating with a human being at the other end. They can still express their concerns, likes, dislikes, and all that part, more than just ticking boxes on an app. It's still engagement. And I think what's important with using digital platforms, this is not a COVID measure. This is this is the way the industry will go. And we have to, as much as we want to keep it engaged and we want to make sure experiences are key, because that's what, in my opinion, drives loyalty. You have to be emotionally engaged with the brand and the property. You want to make sure to use digital apps as an engagement communication tool that can help you, and obviously for storing and personalizing data. And I think that's where a lot of people have mistaken the fact that digital becomes an impersonal tool and it's just a robot or a machine or a CRM that boosts out data. That's not what the new era will be. And for us, we've been very particular that we want to make sure that we use digital as a platform to engage with our consumers direct, more than
100%.
using it as just a tool of collecting and storing and blasting out emails.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think people often forget is that this is probably the closest thing that
Yes.
people have in their life. I mean, some people talk to their devices more than they do their wives and husbands, yeah? And, you know, it's you can't get much more personal than that, yeah? And I think it's the relationship people have with their devices is actually quite, it can be quite a personal experience, yeah? And I think it's quite exciting to see what you guys are doing in that space.
Thank you. We're getting to the end. JJ, you've been listening patiently there for a while. We'll give you the chance to finish up. A lot of what was just said there, we've talked about before. In your business, it's all about making guests feel welcome, enhancing their experiences so they come back. You've talked about the Hilton Honors app. You have a lot of members on there. Tell us how all of this kind of wraps up into empowering guests and improving their behavior from a Hilton and from a hotelier point of view.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, let me say I agree with everything that was said clearly, right? It's about the experience. I think, people have indicated, our customers have indicated that, loyalty comes with the experience. And, we are a business of people serving people at the end. And so how do we make sure that, we continue delivering that experience? So, for us, digital key, the app, the whole journey of checking in, making your booking, getting the right offers is really going to help us to drive loyalty going further. And I don't think the points that you get is really driving the loyalty. The loyalty is the experience that you're getting over and over again. What customers have said to us, though, is that with the points, they want to buy experiences. Mm-hmm. And so we see people using their points to get that experience which they would normally not be able to pay for or not be able to have access to. So making a safari into Africa, staying at the Wall of Astoria, which they would normally not do, they would collect points to actually do that. So, we're using the loyalty as well and their preferences to make sure they have those stays with, the families, because that's the leisure travel which is coming up.
Mm-hmm. I think what we can all agree on is that there's no final point of this. It's changing all the time. You guys have got to adapt more quickly than ever as people's experiences and their expectations change in line with new technologies, new ways of communicating. I thank you all for joining me today. Thank you. Carl, Siegfried, Amir, JJ, thank you very much. It's been a fascinating talk. And thank you everybody for watching. And there's more talks later on during the day, so hopefully we'll all stick around. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Yeah.